So, my guest this week is the new director of the CCPD, Dr. Tricia Zelaya-Leon. She started with us back at the beginning of September. And before this, she was the director of the Career Center at Rollins for 4 years. And I'm super excited to have this conversation with her because even though we've been working together for a while, there's plenty of questions in here that I don't know anything about. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun that both I and you as the audience are going to learn about her together. So, Tricia, welcome to my show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So the first question I'm going to ask you is how are you adjusting to Kalamazoo? Because one of the things that I think most people wouldn't know is that you just recently relocated here with your family this past November, and Rollins is actually located in Florida. So the question I have is like, are you regretting taking this job yet?
You wouldn't believe how many emails start with, "Are you sad that you moved from Florida and now you're in Michigan?" This has been an adjustment. However, I am. Oh, and by the way, for those that might see this, this is my dog Brutus, so he's with me as well. I am originally from Ohio, and so I did some time in Ohio. I've worked in Illinois and Indiana, and so the Midwest is not new to me. This weather is not new to me. And yes, there was a reason I moved to Florida. That job in Rollins was interesting because I was like, wow, it'd be really nice to live down south. What's that like? And so I was there for 7 years, and I did soak up that sun, soak up that weather. But when the opportunity to come back to the Midwest presented itself, I was very excited because my family is still in Ohio. So I'm a lot closer. We don't have to worry about flights anymore. And I do have a couple of kids who have loved the snow. They've made their first snow angels and thrown snowballs at one another. And so it kind of brought me back to the whimsy of being around the winter. I still hate winter. I still hate snow and cold, but at least being with a couple of kids who this is their first time and it's all so innocent to them, it makes it a little bit more palatable. But I will say I am definitely looking forward to the spring and the summer and actually having seasons again, because down in Florida, you only really get the heat. And so there weren't changing of leaves, colors. And so it was kind of weird watching football when it was 85 degrees. So I am excited for that.
I don't know. As somebody who's lived in Michigan for at least most of my adult life, I think that maybe seasons might be a little bit overrated for myself. And I'm definitely one of those people like, you know what actually looks really good? Christmas lights on a palm tree. So eventually I might want to be those people that kind of like leaves this for warmer weather, but not quite yet.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird because I would see those palm trees with the lights, and I would see people with doormats that say "Let it snow," as it's 95 degrees outside. I'm like, oh, okay, well, y'all do you. They've never seen the snow, so it was just weird.
So before we actually get into the breadth of the interview, I always like to start from the very beginning. And so you mentioned that home for you is in Ohio. So tell me a little bit about that.
Ohio. I am originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm from a small town called Milford, which is on the east side of Cincinnati, and it's not a big town at all. It's actually about 9 miles from the Kentucky border. So it's more south. It's a southern part of Ohio. And so even when I say that I'm used to the Midwest weather, it was still pretty mild there. And when it did snow, school would get canceled pretty quickly because the roads, we lived in like kind of a rural area. So there weren't always paved roads, or people just had long distances on buses and things. So it would just a little bit of snow would shut that place down. There wasn't always enough salt and other things. So now being here, when we got like 10 inches of snow and I still see school buses going down the road, that's very foreign to me. But I, that's my home. That's where my extended family still is, where my mom still is. And I loved that time. I loved Ohio. I mean, that's where I actually went to school. I went to undergrad at Ohio University and went there to study Spanish and Spanish education. I had a knack for learning languages, loved taking Spanish classes all throughout high school. And so I thought, you know what? I think I want to be a Spanish teacher. So why don't I go to school and go for Spanish? And so that was my plan. I went, I excelled in Spanish classes, and senior year, I did my student teaching and I took my praxis exams, and I had certification to teach K through 12 Spanish. My hope had actually been to teach elementary school Spanish because, we have this thing called a language acquisition device where when we are younger, we can absorb language a lot easier than when we're older. You probably have met lots of people that took 4 years of Spanish and can't speak a lick of it after high school, but there are people who learned it in kindergarten and are able to speak it because that's just when language is more easily acquirable. And so I wanted to teach those little kids. And so I did my student teaching in winter. We were on quarters too. So, at K we have quarters, and a lot of other places are on semesters. I actually loved being a student at a school that was quarters because I could take a ton of classes in 1 year. Whereas on semesters, you really can only take like 4 classes for 16 weeks. And so I did my student teaching that winter and was fully prepared to find a job and be ready to go. And at the time I'd been an RA for 4 years or 3 years at OU. And at the end of the winter, my supervisor said, "Hey, did you know that you could go on to get a master's degree in college student personnel and work like professionally on a college campus?" And I said, "I guess I never thought about that. I didn't know anything about that." And she said, "Well, they're accepting applications to the graduate school, and we'd love to have you be a graduate hall director. And if you get into the grad school program, they'll pay for your tuition and you'll get free room and board and, all these other benefits. You can continue working in res life." And so I was I had gotten accepted also into the master's program for Spanish at OU, and I was offered a TA-ship. And so I was at this crossroads of, do I go into what I thought was like my dream of being a Spanish teacher, and maybe I could be a Spanish professor or something, and I could TA and do teaching, or do I do what I've learned that I love, like being an RA, working with students, being in a residence hall? The college environment is really dynamic and exciting, and I could learn more about that. And there are these additional benefits that I didn't know about. And so I ultimately chose to go into the master's for college student personnel at OU. And so I took the graduate hall director job, and it was all new. It was a whole new ball game for me. And because I'm a first gen college student, nobody else in my family had ever been to college before. And so even the idea of going on for a master's degree was very new to me. And being an RA, I didn't know what an RA was before I got to college. I barely knew what it was in my first year until I had an RA say, "Hey, you could be an RA." And honestly, the financial benefit was really an incentive for me, but I found that I loved it. And I'll tell you, that master's program was it was so life-changing because I got to be in a cohort of people who were all very different from me. We were all from different walks of life. And I was one of 2 who actually had done their undergrad at OU, and everybody else had come from all these different schools. And so I looked back and I was like, man, maybe I should have gone to a different school for my master's, but I was kind of their educator in terms of like, here are things to do in the Athens area. Here's the culture of OU, and all these other people were coming from different places. So it was kind of nice to have that knowledge and to be able to stay at a place that I really loved. Athens, Ohio is a beautiful area, a beautiful community. That campus was gorgeous. There are parts of K that remind me a lot of OU, like the brick, the colonial architecture, the green. I imagine it's green. I haven't actually been at K long enough to see the greenery yet, but so that was awesome. And I actually, DL Stewart was one of my faculty members when I was at OU. And so they gave me such a wonderful foundation into what student development is like, and the history of higher education and all the opportunities that exist in higher ed. And so that really began my love of working on a college campus. And so after that, I applied to a bunch of different schools for my first job after I got that master's degree, and I wanted to be a hall director. I loved Res Life. To this day, I will say that working in Res Life was my favorite job ever, and also the most exhausting job ever, because I lived where I worked, and I was constantly meeting students and helping them, and dealing with helping them manage independence and living with someone else and living with other people, being in a community, all of that. It prepared me for pretty much every job that came after. But after that, I knew I wanted to work in Res Life. I had a few different job offers, and I chose to get my first professional job at Ohio State in Columbus, and was a full-time professional hall director there, where I was in charge of 3 different buildings. I had about 500 students in those buildings, first-year students all the way up to seniors. And there were some living learning communities in there. And so I got to work with faculty members too. One of the communities that was in there was for the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences, which, I grew up in that small town of Milford, and yeah, there were some rural areas around there, but I didn't grow up on a farm. And so that was an interesting new bit of culture that I got to learn by working with students who had grown up on farms and just agricultural science, and those that wanted to go into vet programs, and connecting with those faculty members to design programs that would help students really connect what they were learning in the classroom to what they're going to do when they actually went back to their family farms, or if they decided to go on to vet school or whatever. I look back on that time now, and I see how so much of that prepared me for the work that I do in a career center now. So I worked at Ohio State in that capacity for 6 years. And also during that time, I realized how much I loved working with faculty, and I wanted to be one myself. And so I thought, well, I could go and start a PhD program while I'm here. Why not? And so I decided to do that while I was also working in the residence halls. So I did full-time PhD courses while also working and living with students and doing all that. Again, very exhausting. It was awesome to be a practitioner and to connect that to a lot of the theoretical stuff that I was doing in the classroom too. And so it wasn't just learning the theory. It wasn't just trying to do all of this and think about it. I actually could put it into practice with my students and engagement with faculty and thinking through things differently. So it was nice to have that dynamic kind of relationship. But yeah, while I was in that PhD program, I actually had a new residence hall that was added to my portfolio while I was there, and it was getting renovated. It was brand new, and they were going to put a sophomore learning community in that building. And they said, Tricia, you're gonna have this building, so it's gonna be added to your plate. And I was like, cool. I don't know anything about sophomores. Like, what are we supposed to do specifically for them? Why'd y'all make this learning community? And the building was all singles. So it was going to be for sophomores and people who only wanted to live by themselves. And I was tasked with building community in that space. I was like, how do we do this? And so that began my descent into a new rabbit hole of how to engage sophomores. And I quickly found that sophomores were, and this was in 2009, maybe, that I started this research. Sophomores were like the least satisfied of all 4 college populations on a college campus. They were the most confused. They didn't know what they would do with their lives. And that was also the year that they had to pick a major. And so you'd see retention rates for sophomore to junior year down. Like, students would leave and drop out because they just hadn't connected with the institution. They weren't able to figure out what the heck they wanted to do. And then they were being confronted with, you have to pick a major at this time. And for many of them, they're like, this is too much, I'm out. And so it was a real problem. And so that was also the same time that I had to start doing some research in the doctoral program for what was going to be, how I was going to contribute to this field. Right. So I had at my disposal all these sophomores in my learning community and, wonderful faculty at OSU. And so I started thinking, okay, well, we do these first year experience programs on campuses. Why don't we think about a sophomore year experience program? And so that's what my research was. I went and I interviewed a handful of different institutions that actually had an installed sophomore experience program on their campus. And I asked the students, what do you think about this? Is this helping you? Is this helping you feel like you're more connected and you're able to pick a major better? And are you going to stay at the college at a higher rate, whatever? And what I found was those programs were not fruitful. They weren't actually helpful because being a sophomore is not cool. Yeah. Students don't really get excited about saying I'm a sophomore because it's that middle child of the 4 years. Like when you're a first year student, okay, there's some cachet to that because I'm new and there's lots of first year experience programs. When you're a senior, obviously, you're a big deal.
That's get out of here.
Yeah. And everybody's thinking about you and getting jobs and all that. Junior, you're close to that. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So it's cool to be a junior. Sophomore is kind of like, well, I'm not a first year student anymore. So I'm not a baby, but I'm not quite an upper class student yet. So I'm in this weird limbo. And so not a lot of sophomores want to say, I'm a part of this sophomore learning community or this sophomore program. And so it got me thinking about how do we infuse specific developmentally appropriate initiatives and activities and resources for sophomores into different places, just kind of like how I try to get my kids to eat healthy foods. And sometimes I have to disguise it in a blueberry cookie, but it's got blueberries in it and maybe it doesn't have sugar because I put something else in there. So that began my journey into integration and infusion of what's good for students into places where they already are. So a lot of students either find themselves engaged in athletics or Greek life or student activities, and how can we work to find opportunities within those areas so that sophomores can specifically feel like they are getting access to resources without it feeling like they are getting called out or that there's a program that sounds remedial specifically for them. And that was really cutting edge research at the time because not a lot of places were seeing a lot of success with those sophomore experience programs. And so I loved that research, and I was hoping that it would parlay me into being a faculty member where I could do more of that research and impart that knowledge to up and comers in the field. And so from there, I got a job as an assistant visiting professor at Northern Illinois University and was able to work in their counseling adult and higher ed program. And I was teaching a lot of courses in there that were introductory for students that wanted to go and work in student affairs. And so it was exciting to share my research on sophomores with them. And about the middle of that first year that I was there, I happened to see, because I was a part of listservs all about the sophomore year, because I wanted to stay up on that research. And I saw a position that came out that was an assistant director for a sophomore experience program at a place called Rollins College. And actually I had never seen that before. And so, I'm skipping over. I actually saw a position at Purdue University for student development and assessment in the division of rec sports there. And I was happy at Northern, but my position there was contractual. And so not a lot of people know, and you don't really know this until you're in the field, but working as a faculty member you want to get a tenure track position, but tenure has eroded to a place where you'll see a lot more adjunct and visiting positions. You
Mm-hmm.
don't often see a lot of tenure track positions. And at the time, that was when tenure track positions were really decreasing. And so I was contractually bound. And it's cheaper to not renew someone's contract and just bring someone
Sure
in,
is.
someone new. And so it was unfortunate that I couldn't stick around there. And yet I was given plenty of time to seek something else out. But I was kind of like, man, this is what I love to do. I love teaching. I love being able to share this knowledge with the next generation of the field. It's so sad that I can't keep doing this. And I really wanted to continue pursuing that, but I did find a role at Purdue working as their assistant director for student development and assessment. And in that work, I had never worked in a rec center before. So that was very new to me. That wasn't something where I thought, I got a lot of experience in this, but I do have lots of experience in student development and assessment. And so that was a brand new foray into learning for me, the culture of being in a rec center. So on a college campus, a lot of people just see a gym, right? Like you think that's where people go to work out, or that's where you do intramurals or whatever. There's what development happens there, what assessment could happen there, what learning could happen there. And that's why I was brought in, to demonstrate that, yeah, there is actual learning that could happen. And so the year that I was there, we actually, they built a brand new multi-million-dollar rec facility. And at the time they got a new president who said, why are we building this thing and spending all this money just so students can have a 50-foot climbing wall? Like, this is worthless. This is not part of the academic enterprise. And so I worked with their institutional research folks to do a little bit of digging. And so anytime a student would walk into that rec center, they would use their ID and you would be able to access their information on the back end. And so we were able to pull data from anyone who came into the rec center. And over the course of that year, we found that if a student came in a total of 16 times over the course of one semester, so that's once a week, they had a 0.25 higher GPA than someone that didn't come in at all. And so you can see that there's lots of research out there that talks about wellness and physical exercise and how that is good for your body, good for your brain. It engages you. And that rec center had the wellness center was in there. They had a dietitian on staff. They had a demonstration cooking room to help students learn how to cook and cook healthy meals. And all the intramural groups met there. They had a huge amount of student employees. And so it was this wonderful way to show the campus and the community that so much more happens in a rec facility than just people working out. Like, there are transferable skills. There are lots of competencies that are gained from this one facility. And yeah, it is worth the millions of dollars that was put into it, because this is an aspect of student development that people just don't give a lot of credence to. And so I was really excited to be a part of that work. And so I had begun starting to publish on that with their institutional research people. And it was then that I saw on that sophomore listserv a position working on creating a sophomore experience program at Rollins College. And I wasn't looking for a job. I was very happy at Purdue. I was actually just on a roll because I'd only been there for a year. So I just learned the culture. I had just done this research. I was really excited to publish on it, really excited to take it on the road, because that was a big deal. And yet my dissertation was on sophomores, and I had this affinity toward understanding the sophomore experience and trying to do more with that as well. And so I submitted an application and had a phone interview. And I remember them telling me the salary, and it was actually only $1,000 more than I was making at Purdue.
Oh, wow.
And so I said to the search committee chair, I said, thank you, but I don't want to lead you on. This isn't a competitive enough salary for me to move 1,100 miles away from my family and where I am now. And I don't want to, disrespect my current employer. So thank you, but no, thank you. And search committee chair said, you know what? We want to invite you to campus. We just want you to interview. Just come down to Florida, take a look at the campus, and, we'll go from there. If you say no from there, it's fine. Just consider it a free trip to Florida. I was like, well, that's not a bad sell. I'll take it. So I went down there and, of course, fell in love with that area. The campus, if you ever get a chance to go, Spanish architecture, the beauty of the greenery, the campus is just super, super beautiful. In fact, that's when you ask a student who goes to Rollins, the number one reason why they went there, oftentimes you'll hear because it's pretty. And a lot of people balk at that and they're like, okay, come on. But it's not a bad reason. I mean, you want to be around beauty and that it makes you feel good.
Hurt.
And so, right. So yeah, of course I fell in love with the place. The people were awesome. And the whole time I was just like, but yeah, that salary, I can't, it's not enough. And so I left feeling good about the interview, but also felt like, it's not going to happen for me. And then when I got back, I think the next day I got an offer, and the search committee chair said, we talked and we were able to convert the position to a director role, and we want to make it more competitive for you. And so they basically made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And so I gave Purdue a month's worth of notice, and I did head down to Rollins after that, where I was very excited to start as the director of student transition. So not only would I be creating the sophomore program, but I was going to be working with a lot of other special populations to focus on retention efforts and academic advising and student success and all these really exciting ventures. And so I got there, and I got about maybe 3 months in to my role, which that's about the time it takes to onboard and just learn the campus, when my boss went on maternity leave. And so I was thrust into an interim director position of student success. So not only was I working on the sophomore stuff, but I was also taking on some of her roles as working in student success, which was the first year experience and connecting with first year programming and orientation and summer programs and lots of big things. And then a couple months after that, there was a restructure of the entire division. And so I was shifted out of that area. The Office of Student Success actually dissolved, and I was moved into a career center where I was still doing a lot of the transitions work, but it had more of a career focus to it. And so I didn't have a background in career services. I'd been looking over resumes for a long time because, when you supervise students or you supervise professionals or grads, you want to contribute to folks' career trajectories, but no one ever told me this is how you look over a resume. This is how you offer feedback. This is how you interview. None of that. It was all just kind of anecdotal or experiential based on my own personal experiences. And so when I was moved into a career center, I felt a little out of my element. And what I was originally hired to do at Rollins, I wasn't able to do anymore because I didn't have the time to create that sophomore program. And so it was this bittersweet feeling of, man, I really wanted to do this work. And how exciting that I get to learn a whole new field and be around new professionals who can teach me what they know. I was surrounded by folks that had been working in career services for 20 years, master career counselors, people who knew some of like the founding fathers of the career services industry. And so I was soaking it all in while also trying to figure out, how do I fit in some of this, and how do I fold in what I was hired to do into this work? And so a year into that was when the college began a campus-wide initiative to infuse career preparation into academic advising, because students, we need to be talking about how students really leverage their academic experience to parlay that into whatever is coming next for them in the world of work, whether that's grad school, whether it's going into service, whatever they want to do. College students nationally, it doesn't matter where they go, they struggle with how to actually tell a compelling story about what all they did in college. And they do a lot, but they sell themselves short quite often. And so it was something that actually was really exciting for me because those were two areas that I was intimately engaged in. And I was asked to serve as like the staff liaison to this particular campus-wide initiative. And I was in the Career Center at that time. And so I was working really closely with faculty members, and my student success background allowed me to have really good relationships with faculty to say like, hey, how are you infusing career prep into your discipline specific courses? What are innovative ways that we can do that so that it's integrated and it's not an add-on to what students are already doing, because they're not coming to the Career Center on their own. And faculty members aren't seeking out Career Center folks to come into their classrooms on their own. How can we just make this a part of the student experience? And so for 4 years, I was moved into the role of the Director of Career Development. And so I was still doing a lot of those student success pieces, but I was infusing that into the work of the career development person. And historically, career development really was just looking over resumes, cover letters, interview prep. I say just, that's a lot. That's a lot of work. There's a whole field and industry devoted to that. But it needed to be so much bigger than that. And I wanted to elevate the game when it came to the Career Center, because here I was, I was new to this field and meeting all these people. And I was like, man, how come students are not engaging with this place? How come students don't know these professionals? Like they are missing out. This is a missed opportunity. I got to get the faculty in on this, because faculty weren't really engaged with this Career Center the way that I thought they could be either. And so that's where we started together this student affairs, academic affairs merging of ideating and looking for ways that would be really high impact to get students to make meaning of what happens in the classroom, outside of it, and then all together. And so I remember early on in my time in the Career Center hearing negative feedback from students, right, who would say like, oh, Career Center didn't help me, or even faculty members saying, Career Center is not that helpful. 4 years later, we didn't really change a lot of what we were doing in the Career Center, right? Like the principles, the foundations, the concepts, the way we do what we do has not really shifted. Maybe there are some new resources out there and more flashy software and things, but ultimately we are listening to students. We're helping them discern what comes next for them and how they are translating what they're doing in college to whatever's coming next. And but after 4 years of just educating the campus community about that, we saw just such a huge cultural shift of students wanting to come to the Career Center and telling their friends, go to the Career Center. Faculty members reaching out and wanting to engage us in the classroom and have us come present and do really innovative things with us to create careers courses or to teach them. We had faculty members fighting over teaching careers courses themselves. Like what a change from only having a handful of faculty who even would agree to refer students to the Career Center 4 years prior to that. So it's really interesting to see, originally I wanted to be that Spanish teacher. And now I'm not teaching Spanish, but I am helping students translate what it is they're doing into what will come next for them. And I'm translating a lot of this even for our faculty partners and for community partners and alumni partners. And so it's a long-winded way of saying that everything really does come full circle, but sure. How you fall into things, it can be by happenstance, but you get to piece all of those pieces together to make meaning of something and to see how it actually all does fit together.
So the question I want to ask you, based on something you said earlier, this idea of you started off wanting to be a Spanish teacher, how did that come about? Like, do you have a clear idea of just like, was it something that you saw people around you doing, or was it something that you were influenced to do?
Yeah, so a lot of people always ask me about my last name, and it's Zelaya. And so my dad is from Nicaragua. And I didn't grow up with him. So my parents divorced when I was very young. And so he wasn't around until I was much older. And so I there are times that I'm like, I wish I knew more about Nicaragua and his culture and all of that. And I wish that I had grown up with the language, but I didn't. So I wasn't fluent in Spanish, but I found when I started taking Spanish classes in high school, I had a knack for the accent. And it came naturally to me, to the point where when I did actually travel to Spain after I graduated from college, when I was there for that amount of time, I sounded like I was actually a native speaker of Spanish. And so I think there was just something innate about it, that when I was told, you do really well at this, you're really good at this, you sound like a native speaker, when you get that kind of positive feedback, you think, well, if I'm good at something, I should just go and get degrees in it and work and make that my job. And I liked it. It wasn't something that I was like, oh, I'm just going to do this because I'm good at it. It really was. I liked student teaching. I actually student taught alongside another friend of mine who was a Spanish major, and she had a really negative experience student teaching. It was not something that she wanted to do. She was like, oh my gosh, what did I get into? And this was the winter quarter of our senior year. So we only had one quarter left before we were graduating.
That's a really challenging time to figure out you don't like it.
Yeah. And I felt super bad for her because she was like, this is not the path for me. And I was like, oh man, all I could think was, well, glad that's not me, because I really did like it. But again, I now being in the career services world, I see that as, man, we have to have these experiences as early as possible, so that you don't get stuck, especially with teaching. We all can remember back to a teacher that you could tell did not like their job, and they made it feel like they were taking it out on you. And so that definitely impacts the people that you work with. And so it was this beauty, the sweet spot that we always talk about, of like doing what you love, doing what you're good at and what you could get paid for. And yet I came at a crossroads of, do I do what's comfortable? I could have gone on and gotten my master's in Spanish, done the TA thing, probably taught, and that would have been comfortable for me. But I decided instead to go a different route, into something that was completely new and challenging and dynamic. And I don't look back on that as any kind of regret. I look back on it as, actually, I do teach. I am an educator, and I especially like talking to Spanish majors about how to parlay their Spanish degree and experience into whatever may come next for them, because it isn't, and not everything is linear. You're not going to, some people want to be Spanish teachers, and so that's what they're going to do. But there are plenty of other language majors that go on and work in all different kinds of industries. And that to me is really exciting.
So one of the questions I'm curious about is, when it came time to make the decision to go to graduate school for the first time and do a master's degree, like, how did you get to the point where you were comfortable in doing that? Because I imagine, as a first generation student, like, probably a lot of advice you were getting is just like, you got a bachelor's, you should actually probably go out there and start earning money. And so, like, you can't necessarily like turn to your normal support system, because like they don't even know what that even means, except for you're just going to continue to be in school for forever at this point. So like, how did you make that decision and know that it was the right move for you?
I'll say I am an achiever by definition. And so I think I always look at other people around me and think, wow, that's a really smart person. How'd they get so smart? I want to be like them. And even that was the case when I was in high school. I always wanted to go to college. My mom didn't tell me to go to college. It was just kind of had a guidance counselor who just asked me where I wanted to go to college, not if I was going to go to college, but where. I was like, oh, I guess let me look into some colleges. That I don't know that I can afford that, but I guess you think I should go. And so I was very lucky in undergrad to be in a residence hall my first year that was it was substance free. I lived in the substance free learning community. And you might be saying, hey, when you're 18 years old, shouldn't all learning communities be substance free?
I've been to college also. So.
But I was placed in this I didn't choose this learning community, because I actually had to move out of my first hall. And I found all these friends who chose to be there. And I think all of them had parents that went to college, and they all had these really specific plans of what they wanted to do. They were very ambitious and very focused on their academics, and it was like the right crowd. You know how sometimes you get in with the right crowd or the wrong crowd.
Yeah.
They definitely were the right crowd for me, and they taught me a lot. And they were where I learned about master's programs and what that meant, and getting graduate degrees, because they all wanted to do that. One of them wanted to be a music educator, so she was in the band and choirs and things, and so she knew she had to get a master's to do that. Another wanted to be a social worker, and she knew she had to get a master's and they had already done all this research, and I had never done that. I was like, oh, I'm gonna be a Spanish teacher. This is a pretty linear kind of path. And so when they all were applying to graduate schools and that was a part of their plan, I was just like, oh, well, that makes sense for me. So I'll go on to get my master's degree in teaching and Spanish. And then, I had a supervisor in Res Life that had a master's in college student personnel. And so I learned from them what that was all about and how I could talk about my identity and my experiences and learn from other people about their college journeys and all of that. And that's what I was going through at the time. I was journeying through college without knowing anything about it. I would love, I was like, that'd be cool to talk with other people about how they got to college and how they've moved through it and how they have made meaning of it. That was all really just talking to other people and having really good influences around me. Because my mom, nobody went to grad school. And frankly, had I not been able to get an assistantship to pay for it, I don't know that I would have been able to go, because that wasn't something that was financially feasible for me. So I'm really grateful to all the friends that were around me being good influences, and to supervisors that pushed me and said, consider this. We would love to have you on our team. And here are the supports that you could see. I wouldn't have known where to begin with any of that without people pushing me along.
I do think that there really is something to the idea about being, well, I should say two things. One is that, like, sometimes just the kismet of falling into things. And two, like, how your options are oftentimes sometimes defined for you, or sometimes maybe even limited for you is the better way of just like what your possibility space is so defined by just like what is around you. And sometimes it really does taking doing something else or expanding your worldview even a little bit. And it's almost kind of like coming out of a tunnel and just be like, oh my gosh, there's so much more on the other side that I just had no idea even existed.
Yeah. And college students won't want to hear this, but age gives you some of that perspective, right?
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I say to everyone, just trust me. Trust that it's good for you to feel uncomfortable. It's good for you to try something that you've never tried before. It's good to look at a position description that looks a little scary or that you don't have all the qualifications for, because that scary stuff is the stuff that really does make you grow, and it shows you who you are, and it's probably going to open a door that you just never knew existed. I mean, I never thought I wanted to be that Spanish teacher. I do very similar things now, but I didn't even know that being a career center director was on the realm of possibility for me. And my goodness, how exciting to be able to do that now. If I could go back and tell my 18-year-old self, this is where you'll be, I would be like, what's that mean? I don't even know what any of that's about. I never went to my career center as an undergraduate. My goodness, could you imagine where I might be had I actually done it? I don't know.
That actually leads me to actually a really great question. Like, if you could go back and knowing what you know now about where your career ends up, like, what would the advice that you give yourself about your career?
I would say don't get so stuck in time. Time really is just a concept, because I was a very big planner. I had my 4-year plan. I had it all set out. These are the courses I will take in my first year, second year, third year, fourth year. I never missed a meeting with my advisor. I didn't need my advisor, to be honest. I went in, I had a list of things to tell my advisor. She checked off on it and said, good to go. You are ahead of the game. You're amazing. I knew exactly what I wanted, and I knew the path that I needed to get there, but I didn't build in any kind of wandering time. I didn't build in time for study abroad. And I tell myself to this day, I didn't have time to study abroad. I wouldn't have been able to graduate in 4 years had I studied abroad. I feel like that is a lie that I've told myself, simply because I had it so stacked that I didn't fill it with anything. And so if I could go back, I would be like, Trisha, just fit that study abroad time in there. There's got to be a way for you to do it. You got to go talk to somebody about that. And I just never did. And so I have been abroad since then on my own. But man, I look at all these students that go abroad now and just the great, rich experiences that they get. And I think, I had a great time in college. I have so much that I learned. It's made me who I am. But that would have really given me just that extra layer of recognizing my place in the culture and in society, and that understanding of intercultural fluency that was just really unbeknownst to me at the time.
So the next question I'd like to ask you is, what are some of the best resources that helped you along the way? Because you said previously that while you were a student, you never went to your career center. And I was a similar, like, it's ironic that I work for the career center now, because I'm like, to this day, I don't know my college that I graduated from has a career center. But there were different resources that really helped me along the way. And a lot of them ended up being like really good friends or really good mentors. So I'm just curious, like, what were those resources for you?
My working in res life those were my people, my supervisor, fellow hall directors, assistant hall directors. Those are the people that I looked up to, and they were the ones that, when I had a resident who was struggling, they were the people that I could go to and say, like, how do I help this student? And they would, there was so much training. Res life is the only field, I feel like, where you have to go through that training every single year, even though it's like pretty much the same information, but there are little nuances here or there about like mental health resources, or just the resources that exist on campus and how to get students connected with them, the wellness center, all the things that I learned being an RA. I might have known about them as a student, but I never engaged with them myself. And so I looked up to those paraprofessional folks within res life as the people to share that information. But also, I actually did go to my career center, maybe their website, when I was an undergrad, because I wanted to put on a program for my residents on resumes, and I didn't invite them in because people had said the career center was bad for some reason. So I took their materials off the website and I did the presentation on resumes, because that was kind of how I grew up. Like, I thought, this information is here, I read it, and I can share it with other people. I didn't think that I would always need like an expert to come in and disseminate this knowledge. And so it wasn't until I started getting more engrossed in res life that I was like, oh yeah, we are interdependent. We have to count on other people. There are people across this campus that care about us and that are experts in these things. And so you don't always have to take it upon yourself to do this stuff. I was an only child, first gen student, very independent, very much like I got to pull myself up by the bootstraps kind of thing. I don't need help, because if you ask for help, that means you're weak. And that means that you don't know something. And so finally, I changed my tune when I started hearing about all these resources and the people that were like, let me come and talk to your students, connect me with your students. And mental health concerns were on the rise. And so I started referring students left and right to places like the Wellness Center and to counseling and psychological services. And yet I had never been to a counselor myself. And so I actually, my senior year, I spoke to a counselor for the first time, and I was like, I feel like I've been a hypocrite this entire time. Like, I've been telling all these students to go do this, and I never did it myself. And so the thing now is, I'm like, students, you have to take a look at all the things that are here for you. They really are here for you. It's not just because we want to get you in the door as a prospective student. Like, going and seeking out the career center is not just a a nice to do. Such a necessity, and especially for students that are so independent and brilliant and smart, it's even better for them to go, because it's like you find out all these new things that you just didn't know, and it gives you a contact of people. Again, as a first gen student, I didn't understand what mentorship was. No one told me seek out a mentor. And again, I saw that as, if I'm seeking out a mentor, I'm asking for help, and I don't need help. I am smart enough. I can do these things on my own. And so it wasn't even until grad school that I started talking to faculty members and asking them, like, how did you get the job that you got? How did you decide that you wanted to go and teach in a higher ed program? Like those, just taking the initiative to ask those kinds of questions was different and new for me. And it's intimidating to do that, to ask someone who's successful and looks like they just, they've gotten into their jobs and they breezed in and they were always smart. But my goodness, if you talk to any person that's doing anything interesting, you will find that they have failed much more than we would ever see. Because what we see is that they are this amazing faculty member, or they are this amazing CEO or whatever. But on that path, there have been times that they didn't feel like that was the right path for them, or there were times they didn't get a paper actually accepted in a manuscript, or they didn't get that one job, and that actually led them to something that they just didn't even know was going to be even better for them. And so it really was res life that taught me to ask for help, and that it was okay to ask for help, and it actually needs to be normalized so much more.
I agree. I think it's only actually been probably in hindsight, with the time and distance of getting older, that I can reflect back and think about, like, oh yeah, like there was a lot of mentorship that actually I had that took place. But at the time I didn't consider them to be mentors. It was like you, where it's just like, oh, I had a group of friends that were all going to grad school that I was kind of like, yo, you need to get your life together. And for what you're saying you need to do, you probably should go to grad school. And I was like, all right, sure, it seems like a good idea. Like, why not? And only looking back is like, oh no, that was actually some really good mentorship that I just happened to stumble into.
Mm-hmm. And it is stumbling into it and listening to people when they give you that advice, because there were some pieces of advice I didn't take when I was asking a couple of different people in res life about, like, should I go into the masters for teaching or for Spanish, or should I do college student personnel? There were a handful that said, you might benefit from going to a different grad school than where you went to undergrad. And I didn't listen to that, because I loved my experience at OU. I had all my friends there. I knew the place. I'd just been there for 4 years. Why would I want to go and move somewhere else? Like, that just didn't make a lot of sense to me. And to this day, I'm very happy that I stayed. It's a wonderful place, but I actually give opposite advice to students now. I say, go to as many different kinds of institutions as you can, because that gives you just new perspectives, and nothing lasts forever. Like, you can, it's only 2 years for a master's program typically. So if it's not the right location or the right fit, you're pretty much done. And then you can move somewhere else. Or if you go from master's to a PhD program, maybe trying a new institution gets that little bit of discomfort, where you at least have another set of eyes on something, just to be able to bring that to your repertoire.
I definitely agree. Um, so I guess the second bit of advice I would ask is that, like, if there's a student that's listening to this and is struggling to maybe find their path, or struggling to kind of figure out like what they should even do for their career, like what was the advice that you would give to them?
For students who are struggling to figure out their career paths, I say, you are right. And you are completely not alone. There are plenty of 40-year-olds that still haven't figured out their career paths. And that's actually a sign that you're doing something right. I know it feels very, very uncertain and scary and anxiety inducing, but ultimately we change, we grow. During your time as a college student, you should be engaging in lots of new experiences that make you a different version of who you were just the previous quarter or the previous year before. And so your tastes change, your interests change, your skill sets change. And so you can't always just settle on one kind of career path, because everything, as we're seeing, we're living in times of uncertainty as it is, and being able to be versatile and adaptable and to meet the needs of different kinds of companies or different kinds of people. That's what employers are seeking right now. They're not necessarily seeking people that only know one field or one specialty or one industry, because every industry has been impacted by this pandemic and every industry has had to pivot or evolve. And if you don't evolve as a person and as an employee, you get left behind. And so
Absolutely.
no matter what year you are, it's okay to like recalibrate and think, I thought I wanted to do this, and maybe I do love this major and I want to stay in it. I'm not going to change the major, but there are so many different career paths that I can explore. And it's okay for me to do that. And I want somebody to sit down and talk with me. It could be my advisor, it could be a career coach, it can be a peer who would just be open to listening to me and helping me like think through, this is plan A, this is plan B, this is plan G, so that if one of those happens to not fit anymore, or you don't get into the top school that you wanted, it doesn't end up being this cataclysmic moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I only had this one plan. What do I do? I'm lost. We're never lost. And we can always recalibrate and find somebody that's willing to sit down with you and work on pencil to put some ideas together, so that at least you have an idea of what could one step be to get you into that next piece. And it's the people. I mean, connecting with people, that is the beauty of being at K. We know people. We want to meet one-on-one with students. You aren't a number here. You aren't just someone that we want to have go through 4 years and then churn out a degree. We really believe in this experience, and we want to make this unique for you, because every K student has a unique story to tell, and we just want to be able to let you tell it in the way that makes sense for you. And so you don't always have to do that alone. And in fact, it'll be much more impactful if you do it with the network of people that are around you. So it's okay to be uncertain. That's why all of us are here, to help you find some sense, to make some sense of all the uncertainty, because it will, just trust me, it will pan out to be okay.
Yeah, I really liked what you said. And I think one of the things that I would agree with you and say that, like, with the vision of getting older and in hindsight, you know, it's less about getting it right and just be like, you know what, I'm just going to try this. And if I don't like it, like, I'll just go do something else and it's fine. Like, it might not be the smoothest transition, but I think more than anything, you kind of learn after a while, like, it'll be okay eventually. Like, it might not immediately, but it'll work out eventually and it'll be fine.
Yes. And you ever meet those people that have that like chill mindset? I feel like I just met somebody recently where they had that just perspective on, it's all going to be fine. It's all going to work out. And no matter how much life threw at them, that was their, just kind of their mindset about it. And it may not be a science. I don't know how much science there is about mindset that's out there, but it truly is like all we can do is take what's thrown at us and work with it.
Yep.
Right. And so for some people, it's like, I need a job to pay the bills. Got it. There is a plan that we can enact for that. And yet we want to get you into a career that also, it pays the bills, but it also feeds your interests, and it feeds your passion, and it feeds your values, and it feeds all of these pieces of who you are. And that is possible. It's absolutely possible. But a career is made up of lots of jobs.
Yep.
And so it does require being open-minded to trying the things that seem weird or don't necessarily seem to fit, but the pieces will fit together. So sometimes it is just kind of taking a step back and saying, you know what? It is going to be okay. It may not feel okay right now, but we can work on this together. You just don't have to be alone in that.
So I want to pivot a little bit and talk about, your experience as a center director, and some of the things that you hope to change about the culture here at K. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, what are some of the things that you learned and you experienced at Rollins that you would like to see and bring to K here?
I fell in love with the liberal arts philosophy at Rollins. Growing up in big state institutions, I really just wasn't aware of what the liberal arts was and the value that it really does bring to the higher education landscape and just to the industry, any industry in general. And so what I saw there was that students were, as I think I mentioned earlier, they were selling themselves short. I was like, man, the liberal arts ethos is steeped in really in strong communication and critical thinking and problem solving and the ability to work together and collaborate and work as a team toward a common goal and be able to and think about global fluency, intercultural fluency. All of those things are baked into a liberal arts curriculum. And I'm not knocking big state schools or any other kinds of institutions, but it's really clear what we do at a liberal arts college. And yet that's kind of intangible, and students don't always know how to talk about that in a way where they could tell stories about it. Like, yeah, I would say I'm good at problem solving. Give me an example of how you do that. And I know you do it because I know that faculty member has this project in their class. So you could easily talk about that. And so it was something at Rollins that I was like, this is so easy to fix. It's literally just like, put this in front of students and tell them like, okay, great. You chose to be at this really pretty college, but the icing on top of this cake is that these are skills that employers actually say that new college graduates are not great at. And yet you have them already built into your degree. We don't have to like go find a place for you to learn how to be a good leader. We don't have to go find a place for you to be a good oral and written communicator because you got to write all the time. You got to do group presentations. These are things that employers don't want to have to train people on. And so that just felt like it felt very common sense to me and like an easy fix. And it's not an easy fix, but it is like an eye-opening, or like, the light bulb goes off oftentimes with students. And so I saw that a lot at Rollins, and I worked with lots of different people to collaborate about how to make the light bulbs go off with students, because it's different. Some students see it right away. Others need it to be a requirement within a class. Others need it to feel like it's part of a co-curricular experience that they're getting. And so I like that. I like that challenge of fusing things in organic ways so that students they can't avoid having these kinds of conversations about why this college, what about this experience has been so awesome for you? Because I know the college experience is truly transformational. And I think it's such a missed opportunity when a student graduates and doesn't see it that way, even if they had a bad experience because they didn't like one class or they don't like their major or whatever. There's always something that we can pull from that and reframe a lot of that. And so I loved that at Rollins because I could wear a lot of hats. I could be working in the Career Center, but I was working with faculty members. I could be working with academic advisors in different ways. I could be working with athletics in different ways. I could be working with student affairs colleagues in different ways to figure out what is the way to do this in your field or in your organization or in this class. That to me is a challenge that is different in every single sphere. There's not one prescription for each one. And how easy it would be if that were the case, but it would render me useless in terms of a job. So I loved that at Rollins, and I could see that cultural shift even in just 4 years. Like 4 years feels like a long time, maybe when you're in college, but for higher education, 4 years is really a drop in the time bucket to see a cultural shift. And so, the opportunity to do that here at K is really exciting, because what I didn't have at Rollins that I do have here is the excitement to make that cultural shift. I have people reaching out to me saying, how do I infuse career preparation into X, Y, or Z? Whereas at Rollins, I had to be the one to come in and sell somebody on why they should want to infuse career prep into the things that they were doing. And by no fault of their own, it's not always the natural thing to be thinking about. If you're, all you do all day is this, why would you want to add more to it? We don't always want to add more work. But here at K, there is a real commitment and a real interest and curiosity to find innovative ways to do that, so that our students can actually easily see all the cool things that they're doing and the benefit and value of what they're getting here. And so I really, I just can't wait for it's only begun. And so I'm really excited for even just the near future.
Are there any new initiatives or any new platforms that you'd like to let students know about?
Yeah, one of the a new platform that we've just brought on is called it's a website called What Can I Do with a Major In? And it is one of my favorite resources. It seems like such a simplistic resource, but it is basically a collection of all different kinds of majors, not just majors that are here at K, but majors that are all over. And the site is housed by the University of Tennessee. So it's not just UT majors, but every major you could possibly think of. And you go to this site and you can click on an individual major, and not only can you see potential industries or fields or jobs that may be associated with those majors, but at the very bottom of the page, it will give you some links to like professional associations and job boards and just interesting other resources to peruse about how you might fall into this major, or why this major might be interesting, or different places where you could learn more and network and connect with other people who know more about this major or had these kinds of majors. Ultimately, we know the liberal arts experience means that you can make any major marketable. You can do a whole host of things with any major, but it is nice to see that there are resources out there that are linked to certain majors. And so if you are curious about which one fits with my passions and my interests, but I am worried about what's the job outlook for this, or what do people with this major do in the future, it just gives you one extra bit of peace of mind to know that, yes, you can get a job with an English degree that isn't just teaching English or just being an English professor. There are plenty of other pathways. And how do you think, because here at K, we got people double major, double minor, a concentration in this. So it also lets you do a little bit of that investigation to talk about the interweaving of why would you be a Spanish major and sexuality studies major? What are the cool kind of intricacies that you can find to intersect those two and make yourself marketable. So it's just a small resource, but it is one that I think I want students to feel like they are in control of their own exploration, their own career journeys. And there are plenty of things that you can do on your own, and then bring that knowledge to an advisor, to a career coach, to a mentor to talk it through. And so it gives you one more kind of tool in the toolkit there. New initiatives are they're things. So that's one resource that I would say is like an easy go there, do that. But ultimately, I think it really needs to be the Career Center should feel new. And for a lot of students who haven't engaged with the Career Center, this is the time. This is why I want everybody to come to us. I don't want you to avoid us, because my goodness, my team, I am so lucky to have this team that I have. And so it's unfortunate that a lot of students have never engaged with the Career Center and don't know my team, because I know, looking back on my time in college, not going to the Career Center, what a missed opportunity that was. I'm positive that those professionals that were over there were amazing, and I wish I could have met them, because I'm really lucky to be able to engage with this team every day, who I know cares deeply about students, deeply about the student experience, deeply about sitting down and connecting those dots, helping you connect those dots, to have that guide on the side. And they have all this knowledge about employers in this area, and how to tailor your job, your resume to each experience, and what case students specifically have to offer compared to other kinds of graduates. And that is knowledge that you can't find just anywhere. And so this center is a real crown in, or a real jewel in the K crown, that, yeah, we have some resources that I would recommend, but ultimately it's the people. It's the people that do this work and do it well. And every student owes it to themselves to come in and engage with us.
Thank you, Trisha, for coming on to my show and for a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Richard. It was great.